may have heard of it. And I thought, well, in there you've got the sort of little thing to tell you where all the shops are and everything, and then it says there, just said everything, doesn't it, really? Buying someone for someone who has everything. Well, if you've got everything, why do you want to buy them anything? It says, why not treat them to a late-side gift cards? I mean, it's such a nonsense. And there we are, that's what we're faced with. I mentioned our loss of connection with the environment, and I've come back to trees again. Once again, this is a bluebell wood, and I took a picture of it last year because it looks so beautiful, really. And I think there is so much pleasure to be had with the environment, and I think if society did change, we would find much more time to engage with that environment, and we would begin to feel that our time was more valuable. We wouldn't have to tear around like maniacs all the time. We do have a lot there with coal, unfortunately. Sadly, I know any of you have heard of these transition towns. I'm afraid I got into a bit of an argument with someone who's sort of the head of a transition town, and he was actually quite unpleasant to me because I was saying that wasn't the answer, and of course in his mind he thought it was the absolute answer. But we all know, I hope, that ultimately wouldn't work for the reason that everything else doesn't work. It cannot work unless everything changes. And BP, I heard on the news the other day that the reason they've done that pipeline, that oil drill the way it was, is because it was cheaper. There was also an employee who flagged up a problem with it. But because, like a lot of employees who whistle-blow and everything else, he was shut up, sort of around the corner somewhere, so no one would hear, and then what happens? We all know. Years ago, the Inuit would have hunted in kayaks, and those kayaks would have been either remade, reused, or rotted back into the ground. They now use motorboats like this, and no doubt Yamaha think it's fantastic to sell on as many of these as they can, not realising they just get dumped on the land afterwards. We are having a fantastic loss of primary forests at the moment. I'm sure you all know about this. I'm not going to dwell on it. You all know about the Amazon. But one word that wasn't said by me was Andrew Mitchell, who's the president of the World Canopy Organization, which is involved in the preservation of rainforests, said on Radio 4 that the Amazon rainforest is worth more cut down than it is standing. And of course, what do you mean by worth? And we all know what he meant by worth. Now, I'm going to talk to you very briefly about my experience as a director of a company. We've got 23 guys working with us. We all get on really well. They work astonishingly hard. Tree surgery is probably outside of mining and all those heavy jobs, one of the toughest jobs there is to do. It's a very physical, hard job. These guys work very, very hard indeed. But constantly, we are in conflict with the environment. We are expected, as far as I know as a limited company, we would be breaking the law if we didn't make a profit. Now that straight away you can see the constraints that puts on you when you're running a business. We are obliged to provide these guys with safety equipment, which of course is good and proper and right. But the reality is that if there's a tight time, like the recession, it's much harder to go out and splash out on a load of new chainsaw trousers or safety boots or this, that and the other. And often in companies that doesn't happen. So if it doesn't happen, something goes wrong. And it often may mean that that person may have an injury or suffer in some way. Hearing loss, let's say a simple example, we are obliged to use hearing protection with chainsaws. That might look all right, but the fact is the little rubber bits get worn out. And the noise of chainsaws, which is extreme, goes into their ears and they suffer from ear damage. It's very easy for the manager to say, oh, that's all right, helmet will last another couple of months, that's all right, no problem. Years down the line, that employee may well have really bad hearing damage and not actually be able to lose his or her hearing. So I don't have to expand on this, but you can see straight away how constantly we're clashing with that. So you can't really grow a business without someone, somewhere, or something suffering. The other thing, of course, is that, and this is a statistic I heard of recently, the people that make these chainsaws, a German company called Stihl, and these are the chainsaws we commonly use, and there's one of our guys there. That's a little chainsaw we use in a tree. But chainsaws, interestingly, give out phenomenal amounts of carbon. And if you use a chainsaw for an hour, a medium-sized chainsaw, this may be hard to believe, but it's been a peer-reviewed paper, it's the equivalent of driving something like 2,000 kilometres in an ordinary saloon car. So 1 hour's use of a chainsaw, equivalent to 2,000 kilometres in an ordinary saloon car. The PhD professor I know that did that study tried to contact Still and get some info, but they were very shady, weren't remotely interested in giving them any further information on that. The other thing, of course, we do is we use these sorts of polypropylene ropes. The reality is, if we were environmentally friendly, people think as a tree surgeon, fantastic job, you work with tree and the environment must be lovely. The reality is it isn't. All we're doing is destroying the environment. We're hacking trees about, to put it crudely. That's what we do. And why do we do it? So a developer can put in a new car park. Or someone's moaning because they've got an expensive car, the aphids in the tree are dripping honeydew from the tree onto their car. Okay, this is the sort of thing that happens, you know. I go up to these people and I knock on their door and they go, I want that bleeding tree down, it's droppy stuff all over me mower. You get an awful lot of that sort of stuff, you know. And they, bless them, they don't, you know, they always start off with this, oh, I love trees, but, you know, you get an awful lot of that. The other thing, of course, is that we are forced to work further afield than is ideal if you are working in sympathy with the environment. If we have to get a job and it's in Hastings, we'll drive 50 miles to Hastings to make the money. And therein lies a problem. You know, using loads of fuel, big diesel truck, hauling vast tonnages of wood up and down the highway. Years ago, of course, this didn't happen. What would have happened is people would have worked much more in harmony with the environment. They would have used hand tools. And of course their job was tough. We all know how tough things were. I mean, I'm not trying to look at it through rose-tinted spectacles here. But nevertheless, there was qualities. There were qualities in as much as they were probably breathing much cleaner air. They were probably more in touch with the environment. They'd hear the blackbirds in the woods. They'd notice what was going on. They'd know about the phenology of plant growth. And they'd know the names of the plants, which our tree surgeons don't. And they've got the helmet on, you know, visor down. Just, you know, they're just with their inner thoughts. You'll be pleased to know this is the last slide. So, this is the planet we live on, and this photograph was taken by one of the Apollo astronauts in the early 70s. About the time, incidentally, when that article in the magazine, The Standard, was written. And Edgar Mitchell, who was one of the Apollo astronauts, looked out at the Earth, and at that time felt that it looked so beautiful and so fragile. And like a lot of the astronauts who walked on the Earth, and believe me, that must have been, walked on the Moon, that must have been an astonishing thing to do. He looked back at that planet and he said, my God, what on earth are we doing to it? Because he knew, even in the mid-70s, you had the environmental movement, you had the rainforest, the whales, you know, nuclear power, nuclear weapons, it all existed in the 70s. He looked back and said, what on earth are we doing to it? And he said, what we need is a new world order. And I believe that is what we need. And I believe that it needs to be socialism. And that's the end. Thank you.